David Grasso here from Gen Biz, here for Bookstr Business with a very special guest, Mark Gottlieb. How you doing?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for having me on the show.
So Mark is unusual in the sense that you are not an author, you're a literary agent for Trident Media Group, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And what does that mean? What is a literary agent?
So a literary agent is like a talent agent for authors. We bring authors to the book publishers in order to help them get published and then in turn to a wider audience.
And how did you get into this? Did you just wake up one day and say, oh my God, I want to be a literary agent?
I grew up, in and around book publishing all my life.
Family business?
Family business, and I thought, it would be good to go to school for this sort of thing. So I attended Emerson College in Boston, which actually has a specialty, an undergraduate study in book publishing.
And you were the president of the publishing club there, weren't you?
That's correct. I was a founding member, later the president, and founded a small press called Wild Press at Emerson College.
Wow. So what's it like day to day? What do you do?
Day to day, it's interesting because you're dealing with a lot of creative and interesting people. It's very dynamic. No one particular author or any one particular book is the same. So, one day you could be working on a graphic novel, another day you could be working on a memoir or, a literary novel, anything.
Yeah, so you do multiple categories. How do you know whether a book is good if it's, a business book or a self-help book or a religious book? How do you know the difference?
So sort of the same way that an actor might audition, what we do is we begin with a query letter from an author, which is essentially a cover letter introducing the author and their book, some of the exciting plot details there, an author bio, and if that letter is well written, it's usually a good indication to me that the manuscript might also be well written, and so we give that a read, see how it is, and if all works out, we offer representation to the author.
So you have a track of success in turning books into movies and television. How does that process work?
That's right. So the agency where I work, we've done a lot of book to film and TV work in the area of with authors such as, we did Michael Ondaatje's The English Patient, a recent Steven Spielberg movie called A Dog's Purpose, even the Julia Roberts movie Wonder, based on the book by R.J. Palacio. So that process is sort of that we go out to L.A., we meet with major studio heads, producers, managers, lawyers, talent agents, and we pitch our books for film and TV adaptation.
So you've been in the industry for 10 years, even though you're just a hair over 30, right? Do you feel like knowing what you wanted to do at a very young age helped you?
I would say so because, I started to read a lot as a result. I went to a school where I could specialize in what I was doing, whereas most other people sort of stumble into book publishing accidentally, and I
stumbled into this accidentally, Mark, so that's basically how normal people work.
Sure, yeah, but a lot of people in book publishing come out of the humanities, and they're trying to make sense of how to run a business when they essentially have, an English degree. Whereas, I specifically sought out, different tenets of book publishing, so.
And VP for Penguin Publishing Group, when was that?
So I worked in the area of production and design under the VP of production at Penguin Books. This was before Penguin Random House merged, and so we covered a lot of different lists for Penguin Books like Putnam, we did books for them, Riverhead, Tarcher Perigee.
All the smaller brands.
That's right.
That are all under the same umbrella?
Yes, these were individual book imprints that fit underneath the overall publishing house.
So you were a photographer at some point. Do you still take good pictures?
I do some photography now and again when I have time. It takes a lot of time to read.
Human, landscape, what type of photography do you
like? I prefer landscape. It's much easier to work with a landscape than to have to move a person around.
It's not easy to capture us. And it's when you capture a person, it doesn't look the same. We look very different on camera than we do in real life.
Sure.
Yeah. So what's changed? So a lot of integration, merging, consolidation in the industry?
Oh, there's been tremendous change in the industry, all from Amazon Kindle all the way up till now, where you have major publishers like Penguin Random House that have merged, and then you also have the retail landscape of Barnes & Noble such that, it had been a long struggling bookstore, and now they might be getting acquired by right now there are one or two bidders, either ReaderLink, which is a very data-driven company, or Waterstones in the UK, an independent bookstore there, and so that could end up making Barnes &
Do you
Noble.
think they can survive this new era, navigate it?
I think so. I hope so. I think people still look for the bookstore experience.
You do?
I enjoy walking into a bookstore, and
I think there's something special about a bookstore. If you've noticed here on 34th Street, Amazon opened their own bookstore.
that's right. They have some bookstores around the city, mainly carrying their own titles, but they do have some titles from other publishers.
So you have your own playbook for how you built your career. What is some advice for someone out there who's looking to make it in this very competitive field?
So if you're looking to break into book publishing, I would say you first need to have a love of books and reading. I would say, again, to have some kind of background in the humanities, although it's good to maybe find a school that also offers an undergraduate study in book publishing. And, I would say to try internships, to, begin to get a feel for what book publishing is like, and maybe consider New York City as a place to live.
This is the center of the universe, correct?
For book publishing, yes.
And for media, for that matter.
Yes, yes.
So who's someone inspiring that you've met along the way in your career?
I've had a lot of mentors along the way. Early on, I had met with Michael Peach, who's the CEO now of Hachette Book Group. At the time, he was a book editor.
Is that Hatchet?
Hachette, French name, but yeah, some people try.
I hear Hatchet a lot, yeah. It's Hachette.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I learned something new today, Mark.
Yeah.
He was the CEO of Hachette?
Well, yeah, he currently serves as the CEO. He's edited people like Malcolm Gladwell and a lot of other people. He had a lot of good advice for me coming out of school.
Oh, we have audience questions here. So, as a literary agent, what's your day-to-day like? What do? You wake up, you eat half a bagel, you told me, and then after you eat that half a bagel, what do you do?
Yep, I run into the office. There are a lot of submissions waiting for me, query letters that I sift through, calls with clients, fielding offers from publishers, negotiating them to the best of terms, presenting those offers to clients, telling the film and TV community about some of the books we have, making book deal announcements. Those are some of the things in an average day.
So how many submissions do you get a week?
Oh my gosh, I try and keep up with them day to day, but they can really pile up. At the agency, there's probably hundreds of submissions coming in every day, maybe for each individual agent.
Do you have a staff reading them, or what do you do? Because you can't possibly read everything that comes in.
Every agent is different in that way. I personally like to read my own query letters and submissions. I want to trust my opinion. But yeah, I can see why people would need help. It's the sheer volume of it. It's a lot.
Is there a way to read content faster or get the gist of it? Is there a certain playbook that you have in terms, do you read the beginning, do you read the end?
Well,
do you read the topic sentences? Like, how do you find time to read all that?
Well, the query letter is the first,
Yeah.
indication that the manuscript might be good, but then I would say you read maybe a few of the opening chapters, a few of the middle chapters and closing chapters, and if you like that, then you can do a complete read of the manuscript, but that's one way to kind of scan through the manuscript.
Yeah, but a lot of times, and I'm a book reader, of course, but a lot of times the beginning and the end are much stronger than the middle. Isn't that something that you kind of have to dive into to make sure that you're engaging in quality assurance and quality control for your readers?
Yes, particularly in the case of fiction, it's about the quality of the writing, and then the author, by extension of that, becomes a household name. So the overall story needs to be very strong for fiction.
So you decided you wanted to be a literary agent at what age? 10? 11?
Well, growing up in a family that works in book publishing, you always dream of doing something like that. It doesn't seem like a possibility at first, especially if someone works at another company where they have policies against that. So it wasn't actually until the year 2000 when our Trident Media Group opened, and I realized then and there it was an actual possibility that I might be able to work in the family business.
So, speaking of that, let's see. Man, we're getting so many questions here. Oh, I had a question. I'll hold these off for a second.
Okay.
We live in the era of this, right? So are books out of date?
I don't think so. I think people are reading on that. They're listening to audiobooks on that. There's a big boom in the audiobook market now. I think
I'm an Audible subscriber, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's a direct result of phones.
So you feel like it's increased traffic or increased readership among people?
Oh yeah, anyone now in the world can get a hold of a book.
Of course, there's no excuse. Is there something you hope to accomplish that you haven't already?
That's a good question, you
I
know.
mean, you're still kind of early in your career. People are living longer now. You're entrenched in the industry at this point. So where are you going next?
I would love to see more of my books find their way into the film and TV space. We've already had some books we've optioned and sold to companies that have gone on to get made. It would be great to see some more. I would say seeing a lot of my other books translated and published overseas in international markets as well.
Yeah, what was it like being an executive assistant? So I have here in my notes that you didn't have your own office at first. You had to work your way up the value chain, didn't you?
Right. When I started at Trident Media Group, I was originally working in the area of foreign rights, and then
Which is big money. Can you explain that a little bit?
so an author who gets their books translated and published overseas, the world becomes your oyster because there are all these countries from around the world. And easily that could end up representing a third of an author's overall income. And from there, I transitioned into working directly with the chairman of Trident, and that was a great learning experience. And after that, I ran the audiobook department at Trident before representing a client list of my own.
Why? Tell us about the audiobook market, because that's very interesting. Because I read books, I read newspapers, but I also listen to books. Are these the same audience, different audience, same people looking for? I mean, my eyes get tired. That's why I listen to audiobooks.
I think there's a mixture of people in the audiobook market. There are people who are on the run, who are on the go, who at the gym or in the car want to hear an audiobook. But now there's also this interesting small subsection of audiobook listeners who transition between reading and listening to the audio.
Interesting. So you can do both, but you have to buy two different ones.
I think it's a technology that Amazon has enabled called Whisper Sync, where you can track your progress on the page and then listen to that same exact place in the audio.
But I have to buy the Kindle and the Audible, right?
I suppose it might be something like that.
Because I've thought of doing that, because sometimes I get tired of listening or tired of reading, rather, and I don't think there's a way to have both without paying for both.
Yeah. It's a neat way where a book can really follow you around, wherever you go.
Have you seen when Google can read to you as well? Have you seen that technology?
That's right. I mean, there are a lot of technologies, even in the iPhone now, where it can read to you. I think sometimes you lose a little bit of the cadence, the rhythm of the words on the page. But
Audible is done by a professional voice artist who
Exactly.
is typically better than the author, if not the author themselves.
Right. So, to have a professional narrator who has an acting background can make for a good audiobook listening experience. Yep.
So here the question is about your upcoming projects. Now, I'm more interested personally here in TV and film because, of course, this is quasi-TV here. Tell us about that.
There are a number of projects. Some of them I can't speak about
Of course
publicly
not.
because they're not announced yet. But we do have something that we recently optioned to Sony Studios.
That's a good name.
There are some things that have been publicly announced.
What does optioned mean?
So optioned is the film or TV studio, the company has the right to sit on the project, try and get it put together, and then if they decide to make it, they decide to purchase it. And that's when they start funding the project.
So
to
it's
get
kind
it
of
made.
like the pre-purchase. They have the first right of refusal, I guess.
Yeah, they can begin to put elements of the project together and have a window of exclusivity.
So let's say you're a writer. You deal with both fiction and nonfiction, right? You deal with everyone all over the map. What catches your eye as a literary agent if you're an author trying to get published?
So I would say that it sounds silly, but obviously good writing. The word, line by line, should be very strong. But also I look for a lot of the story elements, the strength of the plot, character development, and I am looking for that rhythm in the words, almost like a poetic quality in all the words too. So, it's sort of, you're waiting for both feet to drop in that sense. In nonfiction, it's different. It's about the subject matter of the book. Is the author an authority on the subject matter?
What if they're not? What if you're not on the map yet?
Well, sometimes that in the world of nonfiction that can happen, like certain books, Cheryl Strayed's Wild kind of came out of left field for a lot of people. That is maybe because memoir shares a lot of qualities with fiction in terms of the story, how harrowing was the journey, that sort of thing.
So, do you have any crazy author stories? Of course, you don't have to use names here. Do you have any prima donnas in your crop?
Well, I've seen some wild things at conferences. That's right.
We all see crazy things at conferences, right?
Yeah, conferences and workshops. I've met a lot of interesting people along the way. I would say, I've met Ann Perry, who's a famous murder mystery crime writer of dozens of New York Times bestselling books and has a very interesting background. Peter Jackson had made something of a biopic of her life. You meet a lot of people like that at conferences and workshops who are really interesting.
Speaking of crazy, did you see recently the news in the author world that Danielle Steele said she didn't understand how people stop working and that she's at her typewriter something like 8 hours a day. What do you think about that?
It sounds like she must have vertigo and that she's chained to a desk or something. I mean, when I hear of writers who write, 4 books a year, I don't know how they do it.
It's hard.
Yeah, even writing one book is extremely difficult.
Have you ever sat down with your authors to talk about their writing routine and what they consider is the ideal number of words? We were talking about Ernest Hemingway earlier. I'm from Florida. I love Ernest Hemingway. He only wrote about 250 words a day, 400 words. It was a small amount. Do you have clientele that writes a lot of words in one day, stream of consciousness, or others that control for quality?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, the normal book length is really 80 to 120,000 words. I'd say for commercial fiction, it's 80 to 90,000 words for a full-length novel, and you can go outside of that by maybe about 5 or 10,000 words and still be okay. So,
but there is a pretty narrow band then.
Right. Well, then what you have to keep in mind is because books are published, year to year if people are following an author's career, and so you kind of want to break up that 80,000 words, maybe day to day, roughly. And so you would just divide that by number of days in a year, roughly, and try and make a daily goal if you can.
So you said the total was what?
About 80,000 words for, book length work of fiction.
Yeah, you're looking at, if you're disciplined, at least a full year.
Yeah, it can take
and that's not including editing and really thinking about what you're writing, because a lot of times on the first iteration it doesn't come out right.
Yeah, publishers are really thinking 12 to 18 months when they publish a book. So they're looking at books seasonally, they give time where the author can not only write the book, but actually have time to go back through the manuscript, edit it, and bring the manuscript through the production process.
So I live in a world where a lot of my friends have books, and their number one complaint has been is they sacrifice this 12 to 18 months, nonfiction, I'm in the nonfiction world. They wrote this book, and they didn't really get a lot of traction in the end, and they don't really know why they wrote it. Do you hear a lot of that?
There is a lot of disappointment along the way. It's very hard to get published, but I think what's easier for nonfiction authors is nonfiction can be sold on proposal basis, so you can put together 2 to 3 sample chapters, accompany it with a book proposal, rather than going down the road of having to spell out the manuscript in full if you're a fiction author, which just makes
you can't sum up a fiction story, can't you? You have to write it all.
Yeah, exactly. So
nonfiction writer, 2 to 3 chapters, a pitch deck, I guess.
Yeah.
Sounds interesting. Very different. What are other differences between fiction and nonfiction? I'm such a voracious nonfiction reader, but I do, a lot of times there's a fiction story that really takes the world by storm and even draws in readers like myself.
Yeah, I think some of the differences between fiction and nonfiction immediately are that nonfiction is really platform driven. It's if you have 1 million social media followers and 10% of those people buy the book, the publisher's thinking, we're in great shape. That's what's going through their minds, whereas fiction is again, all about the quality of the writing.
It's a bit more democratic then, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you can build an audience in nonfiction, and then in fiction, obviously, it's more editorial or subjective.
Of course. Is there a best time or a season to release a fiction novel? Sounds like fashion, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, publishers think of their books quarterly, publishing throughout the year. They have fall, winter, spring, summer. The biggest books tend to get published in the fall season, leading into the holiday gift
Just like
season.
TV?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So is it difficult to get something optioned or signed to Netflix or production companies, or are there more opportunities now since there are streaming services?
The thing with Netflix is, in the past, you used to have to walk in with it all put together, all the pieces of the show and the budget and all that, and then Netflix could put it up there for you. Now, actually, there's far less resistance, I think, in streaming because a lot of Companies like Disney and places like that are starting their own streaming services.
Apple, Sinclair Broadcasting,
Right.
yeah, I mean all these companies,
So
everyone under the sun.
these licenses are being removed from Netflix, and Netflix realizes we need to produce more stuff. And so now there's, I think, far less resistance. They're open to more things.
So let's talk about technology and how it's changed books. Obviously, a lot of the books are on here now, but I had a book in my hand, a nonfiction book in Spanish, actually, by one of my favorite authors, on the plane the other day. So evidently, this whole idea that books were going to disappear never came to pass. Are we going to start going the other way? Or how else is technology going to change the literary landscape?
You know, when they invented the Gutenberg printing press, people were saying, this is the end of books as we know it. And so people have been talking like that since then. I think books will always be around. There will always be a nostalgia for it, maybe like with vinyl records or something like that. But people will continue to read, maybe just in different ways.
So a lot of the business of getting your book published, right, when you're going through the literary, agent world, right, a lot of good writers happen to be introverts. In fact, you strike me as an introvert myself. How does an introvert navigate a world of, you got to go peacock, you got to go believe in yourself? It reminds me of my work in entrepreneurship where you got to pitch, you got to believe in your product. How do you survive in that type of world if you're a quiet writer?
Yeah, I mean, you really have to realize that it's like someone seeing someone on a late show. They want to hear not from the camera guy or the lighting guy. They want to hear from the director, the actor, and the writer has to realize you're all those things rolled into one. So it can be difficult when they're very shy or reclusive, but in other cases it just makes people more fascinated by them. J.D. Salinger is a perfect example of that.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah, but a lot of these characters throughout history have been exactly that. They've been characters. They've been very, what's the nice way to put it, eccentric. Yeah. But isn't that eccentricity what gave them their literary talent in the first place?
Yeah, there's it's a spark to their creativity, sure, yeah.
Okay, and what advice do you have we talked about becoming a literary agent, but just for authors in general, even if you're not getting your stuff published, a lot of people who watch this are very passionate about writing, and I think they do it as a way, it's cathartic, it's fulfilling, etc. What is your advice for them?
I would say, be persistent, try to know how you can help in the process if you get, close to getting published or on to that journey. Don't be discouraged by, rejection. That's a natural part of the process.
Man, I think we all need help with that, though.
Sure,
Rejection's
yeah.
rough.
Oh, yeah.
It's like the same parts of your brain that associate with pain.
Oh.
Correction. It's hard.
Yeah, but it's a learning process. You gain a lot from that, too. You become a better writer through the editorial process.
I guess a lot of us, especially, people around our age, especially in their early 30s, think about, maybe we missed the boat. Is that true?
I think there's always time. There are people who kind of bloom late. There are writers I know who, I had met with a woman at the Yale Writers Workshop. She said, she wanted to tell me her age. She said, "Now don't hold that against me." And I said, "Why would I hold that against you?" She ended up getting published much, much later in life. So it could happen for anyone at any point in their life.
So my last question revolves around demography. So demographics in the United States are changing, culture is changing. How do you feel like books need to be updated to reflect, our new reality? We live in a divided country because of politics. We live in a more multi-ethnic country. We live in a country where, females, LGBTQ people are more in the mainstream. How are books reflective of our new reality?
I think for a long time, a lot of publishing has been receptive to a lot of that, and especially today more so. There are a lot of things like a big push now for diversity in book publishing, both in the people who work there and the books that are published. There exists the Lambda Literary Awards, which is a literary award for the LGBTQ community. So I think there's a lot of openness and accepting.
And there's a lot of business opportunity there as well.
Certainly, because there are all these underrepresented audiences who now are finally being catered to.
Okay, is there such thing as good writing, or is it entirely subjective? We touched on this a little bit.
It's different from individual to individual because it's like you say, it's subjective. We walk into a museum, we look at a painting. You say to me, "How can that painting be in the museum?" I say,
Especially all that modern art, dear God.
Yeah. I say, "Are you crazy? That's worth millions of dollars." So it really is different person to person. It's just so hard to say. But I don't know if you could really make a final decision about that. You could really be surprised. I know so many #1 New York Times bestselling authors who have all their rejection letters saved and pinned to their fridge.
Really? They keep it on their fridge? I don't know if I would want that potent reminder of failure so in my face.
Well, I think now they look at it and they smile and nod, you know?
Well, it's nice in retrospect. What are the biggest mistakes you read in agent queries?
Query letters that are too short, query letters that maybe exclude too much information like an author bio.
Know your audience. You guys like content. You'd rather err on the side of long than short, correct?
Sure, yeah.
Interesting. And how difficult is it to get an unknown author the attention of a larger publisher? Is it possible in today's world, or are the gatekeepers, keeping a lot of people out?
For a long time, debut fiction was really difficult, but I think that has changed in recent years because publishers look at a debut author as someone with no prior book publishing baggage. There's a 50-50 chance with them. And so a lot of publishers are betting on debut fiction, overpaying for some debut fiction, but also being surprised by how successful some of it can be.
Because it's cheaper to have a debut author instead of someone more established. Getting Danielle Steele to publish a book is very pricey, I imagine.
Sure, there's that, but then on the flip side, there's no prior sales track record to make an evaluation on. They can only make a purely editorial decision.
And what's your favorite success story recently then?
For a debut author?
Sure.
I would say, there are a bunch of different authors I work with. Recently, I had sold a book by Marco Raffaella called How Fires End, kind of a book about his familial history in Italy. It had sold to Little A, which is the literary imprint.
I've read about this book, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Has it been co-opted into a film yet?
Not yet. It still hasn't even published yet, but we've received film and TV interest for the book.
That's awesome. So when you intake this content, you look at it from every angle, don't you, when making a business decision? It's not just the book, it's the foreign rights, it's the television, it's movies, it's audiobooks. I mean, there's a whole ecosystem around all this.
That's right. I mean, a book can live in many different facets and revenue streams, so we see how a book could possibly work in all of those spaces, yes.
Well, it's been great having you, Mark.
Thank you
so much.
I appreciate it.
And
Thanks so
we'll
much.
see you soon.